Coming up next on NewsDepth, people in Mississippi gathered for the annual National Women's March. Mary tells us about Sojourner Truth's powerful "Ain't I a Woman" speech. Regions of Spain have been hit with severe flooding, and we celebrate November as Native American Heritage Month. NewsDepth is now. Tens of thousands of people across the country held rallies last week to mark the annual National Women's March. Hello, I'm Yigal Kaufman, in for Gabriel Kramer. Thank you for joining us. Dozens of Mississippians gathered in Tupelo for a women's march organized by Indivisible Northeast Mississippi as part of a national movement for feminism. Feminism is the belief in social, economic, and political equality for all genders. The march aims to highlight the importance of women's independence and empowerment. Caleb Green has more.
Now with all your might, we support women's rights.
Rallying cries sound as dozens of Mississippians march for women's rights. The National Women's March in Tupelo, organized by Indivisible Northeast Mississippi, is part of a feminist march, Our Bodies, Our Future, that is happening in Washington, D.C. and many other cities around the country. The march ends at Fair Park, where influential speakers share their vision for the women's rights movement. The event is important to women because it lets them know that people are fighting for them, says Peggy Rogers, the Women's March State Coordinator.
Women across the country need to know that we are out there and we are fighting for women's issues across the country, internationally as well as locally.
To stand for something like this in this small town is just such a huge, huge deal, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it.
This is the time to really get engaged, to make sure we're championing women's rights and the things that are concerning to women around the world.
Rogers says that personal autonomy is a key issue their movement is fighting for.
Women have a right to be a part of America. We no longer take a back seat to other people make a decision for us. We can make our own decisions.
We're not going back to a place where women had to stand behind everybody else. We're not going back to a place where women had to ask permission to be women. We're moving forward.
Rogers says the message that young women should take away from this march is one of independence and aspirational growth.
That you can do whatever you want to do, and you can be whatever you want to be, and you can climb to the highest range.
Thank you, Caleb. Feminist movements are nothing new. People have been fighting for equal rights since the dawn of time. The first organized wave of the feminist movement in the United States began in 1848 with the Seneca Falls Convention. Just a few years after that, Ohio women decided to do something similar here, holding Ohio Women's Conventions in Salem and Akron in 1850 and 1851. It was during one of these conventions that a former slave, Sojourner Truth, delivered the groundbreaking speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" The powerful performance is still used today as a call for equal treatment of women. Mary has the story in this week's No Ohio.
Men and women are equal. Oh, what? That's not news to you? Well, back in the 1800s, that would have been a very controversial statement. Back then, most Americans assumed that there was a natural order in society, which said that women should be meek and obedient to the men in their life. And because of this, women were denied education and career opportunities, voting and property rights, and equal wages. And of course, they were not supposed to have political opinions or speak publicly. While some unruly Buckeyes had some other ideas. In fact, some of the first women to fight these unfair beliefs were Ohioans. Activists like Oberlin's Lucy Stone, Ashtabula's Betsy Mix Cowles, and Marietta's Frances Dana Gage were some of the earliest women to publicly demand rights. Interestingly, many of these early female activists were also involved in the anti-slavery movement, which was an even bigger issue of the time. But after a big convention for women's rights was held in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848, Ohio women decided to do something similar here, holding Ohio women's conventions in Salem and Akron in 1850 and 1851. The 1851 Akron Convention was very successful and brought more men and women into the movement. But this convention might not even be remembered were it not for one woman and her powerful words. In fact, it's a speech so moving that it's still widely read today, over 160 years later. Sojourner Truth was a former slave from New York. She escaped slavery in 1826, then fought in the courts to avoid having her son sold into slavery in the South. At the convention, at which many of the speakers were white women, she touched upon the double burden of being a woman and being black.
That man over there says that women need to be helped in the carriages and lift over ditches and to have the best places everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. Ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I've plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear a lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off into slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman?
Sojourner's full speech was transcribed by Marius Robinson and published in his newspaper, the Anti-Slavery Bugle. Along with the transcription, Robinson wrote, "It is impossible to transfer it to paper or convey any adequate idea of the effect it produced upon the audience. Those only can appreciate it who saw her powerful form, her whole-souled, earnest gesture, and listened to her strong and truthful tones." Truth's raw, honest words stand the test of time. Today it's known as the Ain't I a Woman speech, and it's been recited by famous writers like Maya Angelou and Alice Walker, along with famous actresses and politicians. And it still inspires us to call out hypocrisy and draw upon our struggles to make us stronger.
Thank you, Mary. For our Write to Us this week, we want you to create an ad for one of these early women's conventions. And extra points if you draw a poster and send it to us. Students can use our inbox form on our website or send us an email to newsdepth@ideastream.org. Last week, we met some senior citizens that prove you're never too old to try something new. And we asked you to picture yourself when you're 80 or 90 and tell us what would be a record you would like to break at that age. Let's see what you had to say by opening our inbox. Piper from Olmsted Falls Intermediate School in Olmsted Falls already has their eye on the ball. Dear NewsDepth, I would like to break the world record for the longest football throw to prove that old people can also break records. Desmond from Columbus Gifted Academy in Columbus knows their love of music will last their entire life. Dear NewsDepth, if I could break a world record while I was 90 years old, I would be the oldest person to write and release a song. I love music and I play many different instruments, so this would be a fun world record. Haley from Waynesfield Goshen Elementary in Waynesfield wrote, Dear NewsDepth, I would want to break a world record in cheer because it would be fun to know different cheers. Go Haley. Let's also cheer on Abel from Bellevue Elementary School in Bellevue for their amazing flexibility. Dear NewsDepth, I think I'll beat the world record for hitting a backflip at the age of 99 years old. And it would be amazing. I would be the oldest flexible man in history, so I can prove people wrong. You can do a backflip at any age. And I just know Elise from St. Ursula Villa in Cincinnati will be as cool as she is now when she's 80. Dear NewsDepth, I would like to be 80 or 90 and be able to rap. That's right, to rap a song. I don't know how to do that now, but that would be so cool. Thank you so much for writing, everyone. When I'm that old, I would like to be the oldest person to ever win a breakdancing championship. In my work, I get to meet all kinds of inspiring people. I've met famous authors, civic leaders like mayors and community advocates, and I've even met Newshound. But the people who inspire me the most are the people I get to meet when I'm working the NewsDepth beat for the A+ Award. This week's A+ Award winner is B, who's a pretty inspiring inventor. B is a 7th grader at the Birchwood School of Hawken, located in Cleveland. I would describe her as a perfect example of the idea that hard work pays off. You're probably curious why. You see, as a 4th grader, B was inspired by her brother's participation in a competition called the Invention Convention. The Invention Convention is a worldwide competition that challenges students to use their creativity and problem solving to create or invent solutions to challenges. As a 4th grader, B started to experiment with different fibers to create a new yarn that would be comfortable for people who have allergies. She worked with alpaca, nettles, which are a plant, llama, and camels. But she told us that her favorite fiber to work with was milkweed. She taught us that milkweed fibers, once you harvest them from the pod, are actually hollow. And because they're hollow, they act as an insulator to keep you warm. And did you know that milkweed fibers are super lightweight and can even float? Super cool, right? Bee told us that through her yarn testing and practice, she figured out how to create yarn using milkweed. And to do that, she had to test all kinds of fibers, learn to use a spinning wheel, and even figure out a way to harvest milkweed. Along the way, she got to join a spinning guild, which is a group of people who share their expertise in spinning. Through all of this, she entered her yarn in the Ohio Invention Convention and made it all the way to the Invention Convention US Nationals, held at the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation near Detroit, Michigan. Bee told us that she's learned a lot about herself and spinning along the way. She told us that big challenges lead to big payoffs and wanted us to remind you that giving up might be easy, but facing a challenge will make you proud of what you can accomplish. Congratulations to Bee for being named this week's A+ award winner for her problem-solving skills and her work as an inventor. We're now switching to some international news. Last week, Spain was hit with torrential rains that overflowed rivers and normally dry canals, triggering flash floods that submerged entire communities. Torrential rain is rain that falls very hard and fast, or in large amounts. Before we get into the story, let's take a spin around the globe to learn about Spain. Spain is a country located in southern Europe, on the Iberian Peninsula. More than 48 million people call Spain home, making it one of the most populous countries in Europe. The capital city is Madrid, and Spain's government system is a parliamentary constitutional monarchy. Their currency is the euro, and Spain's biggest exports include motor vehicles, machinery, and food products. The hardest hit area was Valencia, where hundreds of volunteers are now helping to clean up after the devastating floods in Spain. Atika Schubert has more.
I'm Atika Schubert in Valencia, Spain, and this is the area where whole communities have been cut off from power, from food and water. But I want to show you something amazing. You see this line of people behind me? These are the people that showed up to help with the cleanup. The government said anybody who wants to help with the affected areas, show up here at 7 a.m. and we will bus you there. Take a look at what happened. Thousands of people came out with brooms, with mops, with buckets, all wearing mud boots, rain gear, anything they can do to help get stuck in and help their neighbors literally dig their way out of this crisis. But there is a flip side to this. A lot of people here angry and frustrated with the response of the government.
There was people that like for 24 hours, they didn't have water, they didn't have something to eat. And you know, we are in Spain, we are in the European community, so having to see something like this, having to see people like not receiving help for this much time, you know, it's like, wow, why? Why is nobody coming?
I've been out in some of the flood-affected areas in the last few days. There is still mud, a foot high or more, just caked in a lot of these areas. And residents there tell me they saw the waters coming, and then half an hour later or an hour later, they got the alert on their phone. That's much too late. Plus, emergency services are having a terrible time getting to some of these areas simply because the highways are choked with cars that have been piled up on top of each other by the flooding. So what you're seeing today is an outpouring of community, and it's heartwarming, but it also is fears that the government is not capable of responding to this crisis.
Thank you, Atika. Valencia residents blame the level of devastation and loss on a delayed emergency warning. While back in the States, Oklahoma City residents are grateful for an emergency alarm waking them up in time to prepare for a storm. A devastating storm that they initially thought was just a thunderstorm damaged vehicles, roofs, and homes. But luckily, the people in this southeast Oklahoma City neighborhood came out unharmed. Jamison Kiefover reports.
Destruction after what people in southeast Oklahoma City thought was a typical thunderstorm. Katie Anderson and her husband Jackson were jolted awake early Sunday morning.
We woke up to the National Weather Service alerts on our phones, and it took us a second to understand what it was.
Debris crashing into their backyard, including someone else's boat. Plus, the weight of the rapid rainfall caused their roof to collapse in multiple places, including just feet from their bed.
I could only see when there was flashes of lightning as we were going, but it was just random things moving. So it wasn't just your normal thunderstorm.
Anderson was living in Shawnee when the April 2023 tornado damaged her home there. She moved to southeast Oklahoma City only to experience another destructive storm less than 2 years later.
The fact that we woke up is a miracle. Every single thing is replaceable, but the people aren't. And so for us to walk away with like absolutely no injuries, no issues at all, like that to me means way more than whether or not I have a couch or a roof.
In comparison to what some of her neighbors are experiencing, she says they are lucky. Vehicles flipped, lost roofs, or complete second stories gone.
It's really, really bad down there.
Joshua Jetto and his family live in this neighborhood. Thankfully, they're all okay. He tells us they heard the sirens once the storm already hit, but woke up to debris smashing in their windows.
Our grill went flying, everything just destroyed our whole backyard.
Several people said they never heard the sirens, only the alarms on their phones waking them up. Shane Barker said he felt like he and his dog had seconds to shelter before the tornado hit.
I looked outside and within like 5 seconds, all hell broke loose.
Several people told us they had to rush to a bathroom or closet without enough time to make it into their storm shelters.
Heard the house being hit by everything, and the house shaking and the roar like you always hear about.
There wasn't much time to even take in what happened overnight. With thunderstorms continuing to roll through while people try to clear debris and salvage what they can.
Thank you, Jameson. 1 month after Hurricane Helene, parts of North Carolina are still fighting to return to a sense of normalcy. Community members have come together in support. For example, musicians hosted a benefit concert in Charlotte to raise funds for the victims of the storm. And Asheville schools welcomed back students with a modified schedule and a focus on emotional support and gradually reestablishing normalcy. John Lawrence has the update.
This flood hit 27. I mean, you can see the flood water mark.
Hurricane Helene is long gone, but the aftermath remains.
There was some video of an area that I knew intimately in Western North Carolina, and when they sent the video, I didn't know what I was looking at. And it was stunning to me to see this area that I grew up in, that I knew, that I no longer recognized.
On Saturday, Eric Church and nearly a dozen other musical acts held a benefit concert in Charlotte to help the victims of the storm. Show officials say all proceeds will go to hurricane relief efforts, including businesses trying to get reestablished.
We've done $18,000 of refunds so far. So I'm like taking the money that we've raised for rebuilding the restaurant and just using it to refund the hotel rooms.
As for the week ahead, students in Asheville are returning to the classroom with a modified schedule.
The focus isn't going to be jumping right back into academics, but really taking time to connect with their friends, to get back into a sense of normalcy in a gradual way. And then on Wednesday, we'll be back to our full schedules.
According to the superintendent of Asheville City Schools, none of the schools were damaged in the storm, and all have electricity, internet, and running water. November is Native American Heritage Month. Native American Heritage Month is a time in the United States dedicated to honoring and celebrating the rich and diverse cultures, traditions, and contributions of the indigenous peoples of America. Indigenous means originating from a particular place. It's important to note that the observance of Native American Heritage Month is part of ongoing efforts to recognize and respect the diverse cultures and histories of indigenous peoples. It also aims to promote a more accurate and inclusive understanding of the history and contributions of Native Americans in the broader context of American history. The first peoples to inhabit our country and our state would eventually become the Native American nations that we know today. But of course, it took years of history for the United States to become what it is today. For this week's Spot on Science, Jeff takes us all the way back in time to meet the first Americans.
The history of Native American people stretches back long before Columbus launched the European colonization of the continents. Exactly how long ago remains one of the biggest mysteries in history and science. To unravel the mystery, we need to start at the beginning. People first made their way out of Africa 100,000 to 200,000 years ago. People spread to the Middle East, then South Asia, Southeast Asia, later to Europe, Siberia, and by around 40,000 years ago, traveled all the way to Australia. So, when did people first arrive in America? For years, scientists believe the first people arrived relatively recently, around 15 to 20,000 years ago. That's when sea levels dropped low enough during the last ice age to create a land bridge between Siberia and Alaska. People could walk across the bridge through Arctic ice and snow to the greener pastures of what is now the United States. Evidence of the first Americans comes from the Clovis Point, a versatile stone tool unique to North America. It's named after Clovis, New Mexico, where they were first found. The Clovis culture, as it's called, dates to around 14,000 years ago. Clovis points are found all over America, including in Ohio. But newer discoveries are pushing back the arrival of the earliest Americans. In 2021, scientists discovered fossilized footprints of people walking through ancient mud in what is now White Sands National Park in New Mexico, all dating back 23,000 years ago. It's the oldest direct evidence of humans in America. So, when did people first arrive in Ohio? That's actually a little easier to answer because Ohio, until 14,000 years ago, was covered by thick layers of ice. Geology, the science that studies the Earth's physical structure, tells us that conditions during the Ice Age made it impossible for people to live here. That is, until the ice melted. At this point, people began moving into the newly opened landscapes, leaving behind clues like Clovis points at sites across Ohio. One, called Paleo Crossing in Medina County, is among the original encampments of the first Ohioans. So wherever you live in Ohio, people likely have been living here for thousands of years before your family arrived. Who knows? Your ancestors may be here 10,000 years from now, and why not? It's a beautiful place to live.
Ohio is a beautiful place to live. Thanks, Jeff. In California, Joshina Clough of the Woodland's American Indian Parent Committee has created a unique library focused on Native American history and culture. The new library offers books for all ages on topics like Native traditions, the gold rush, and the impact of missions. The library is the first of its kind in Northern California and hopes that it will inspire similar initiatives across the region. Ashley Sharp takes us inside.
This is the first time that the students are going to be able to understand and get some insight into Native culture, Native tribes, our different traditions and ceremonies.
Book by book, Joshina Clough of Woodland's American Indian Parent Committee built a library full of Native American history and heritage for all ages.
And we want people to learn about the impact of the gold rush, the impact of the missions, the impact of John Sutter.
The library, housed in the district's Native Student Resource Center at Douglas Middle, was blessed Wednesday night and officially open to students and the public.
So this is a big accomplishment. It feels good to be one of the first kid to check out a book from here.
Woodland Joint Unified's superintendent says these investments for the district's Native American students are a long time coming.
To us, this is important to acknowledge that, no, you are not forgotten. We see you, we hear you, and you're important to us.
Because never forgetting the tribal truths of these lands means passing those stories on to the next generation.
It gives people to read the truth, right? They don't have to stereotype anymore or make things up or see things on TV.
Mike Duncan of the nonprofit Native Dads Network says this library is a first of its kind.
We are modeling something that has never been done before in like an elementary or a middle school district in Northern California.
It's the first page of a new chapter in Woodland schools that organizers hope will be read region-wide.
And that brings us to our poll for the week. We want to know, how often do you visit the library? Jump over to our poll page to vote. You can choose between every week, every other week, once a month, sporadically, that means every once in a while, or I haven't been to the public library yet. Last week, we met some impressive athletes, and we wanted to know, what is your favorite sport to play? Let's check out the results of the poll. With 30% of the votes, a lot of you said your favorite sport was one not on our list. About 28% of you said you loved to play soccer. Another 22% voted for football. 10% of you said baseball was your favorite. 4% of you said you're not that into sports. 3% of the votes went to hockey, and another 3% of you voted for tennis. That's my favorite. I wonder if NewsHound has a favorite sport. Let's ask him. It's time for Petting Zoo. Hi, NewsHound. NewsHound? Oh, here he comes. Wow, NewsHound, you're running so fast. Is running your favorite sport? Or maybe you're just really excited to tell us what you found today. Oh, you got a story about a rare owl that was rescued from the Pacific Ocean? To learn more about how this owl is getting the care it needs, click the Petting Zoo icon on our website. That's a great story. Thanks, NewsHound. Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of NewsDepth. We'll be back with you next week, but until then, you can always stay in touch with us, because we always want to hear from you. You can send a letter. We're at 1375 Euclid Avenue. That's Cleveland, Ohio. The zip code here is 44115. And you can email us at newsdepth@ideastream.org. Plus, you can catch all of our special segments on YouTube. Hit subscribe if you're old enough so you don't miss out on any of our new videos. Thanks for joining us. I'm Yigal Kaufman, and we'll see you right back here next week.
NewsDepth is made possible by a grant from the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation.